Valve's rebooted Steam machine is real, it's official, and it's mid. Clearly intended for Steam Deck owners who got a taste for PC gaming and want to take the next step without the hassle of building their own gaming rig and installing their own Linux distro. That's all well and good. I'm not against a low-spec gaming PC for the right price. But its trailers making 4K 60 promises its hardware can't keep. And there are limits to this thing that means even a smooth 1080p isn't guaranteed in all games. This is why you don't send a multi-billion-dollar corporation to do a PC enthusiast's job. From what we know about the Steam machine so far, it looks like it's going to be a fancy mini PC, a mobile CPU and GPU in a case that looks suspiciously like a Silverstone, built for playing titles from Steam's most played list. And while that's not a bad thing, I think it still leaves a lot of room for improvement. The 6-core CPU might not be enough for some of today's more complex games, and the low-end RDNA 3 graphics don't really have enough VRAM for any AAA release of the last couple of years, so gamers would be forgiven for wanting something along the lines of a hypothetical Pro. Not that Valve would ever make one. In fact, as a Steam Machine Pro would be their third major gaming PC product, it would be completely out of character for them to do so. However, since we have Bazzite OS, a variant of Fedora Linux which uses elements from the SteamOS front end, there really is no reason why we can't make our own. Starting with the CPU, and in fact the motherboard too, the Minisforum BD790i X3D board has an integrated Ryzen 9 7945H X3D, one of the best mobile gaming CPUs in the world, with 16 cores, 32 threads, and a whopping 128 MB of L3 cache. The Steam Machine's CPU is going to have more in common with the mobile Ryzen 5 series, which have just 16 MB of L3 cache, so unless Valve have been hiding an X3D chip up their sleeve for some reason, the Minisforum's gonna blitz the Steam Machine in CPU performance. 64GB of DDR5 SODIMMs is pretty overkill for a console in 2025, but it's what I had to hand from my Minisforum review earlier this year, which is linked below if you're interested. The official GPU of the Steam Machine is an RDNA 3 model with 1792 shaders and 8GB of VRAM. Basically an RX 7600M, not a weak GPU by today's standards, and not far below the average gaming GPU according to the Steam survey, but I went a little further. The RX 7900 XT is on the same architecture, but with an extra 12GB of VRAM and a whopping 84 compute units for over 5300 shaders, making it more than 2.5 times more powerful than the Steam Machine. It's not quite the top of the RDNA 3 tree, but it's as close as I've got. To keep things relatively console-like, I'm using my Fractal Ridge desktop ITX case that I usually use for this kind of build, along with a Corsair 850W SFX PSU. Recreating this exactly would not be cheap. All in, you're looking at spending over £1,700 or over $2,000 US. But you wouldn't really want to. The BD790i X3D is a great choice for a premium ITX build, and actually quite reasonably priced for what you get. But the downsides are a slightly perplexing BIOS and being stuck using laptop RAM. A Ryzen 5 7600 or Ryzen 7 7700 and a B650 ITX board should be enough for this, and would be a bit cheaper, though once you factor in a good low-profile heatsink, you're probably only saving £50 to £100. You can save a lot of money by not getting 64GB of RAM, especially in the current memory market, and going for regular DIMMs rather than laptop ones would not only be cheaper, you'd probably get better performance to boot. Finally, the RX 7900 XT is basically not a good buy in 2025 unless it's cheaper than an RX 9070. I know the extra VRAM might look enticing, but the 9000 series have better ray tracing and upscaling, and I think are going to age better in the long run. You could probably build a Steam Machine Pro that's as good as or better than this one for £1,500. That being said, all of this should still fit the bill, and now it's time to prove it. The announcement trailer for the Steam Machine talked about running games at 4K 60fps with FSR, and used Black Myth Wukong as one of the examples. Now, I don't know how well the official Steam Machine will be able to stick to that, or what settings it'll use, but it's proving quite a challenge for the Pro. Native 4K isn't happening. At cinematic quality, frame rates are appropriately in the 20 to 30 FPS range, and dropping to highs needed to stay above 30 all of the time. Upscaling is added using a slider, and this red warning label doesn't vanish until I drop the scale to 50%, equivalent to FSR performance, meaning that the game is rendering internally at just 1080p. Now the cinematic quality preset just scrapes below 60, and very high is needed for a largely 60 plus experience. I actually found cinematic to be fairly playable, and looks great for the most part. But this FSR isn't exactly lossless, as can be seen from the motion trails behind particles and the fizzling around hair, which there's a lot of in this game, where you play a monkey. I think I see how Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is going to work on the official Steam Machine. In Bazzite OS, the game has a dedicated Steam Deck setting for texture quality, and at the time of writing, it can't be disabled in the menu. This condenses memory usage significantly, so that it's only using just over 8GB, even at 4K with quality FSR. However, it also means that texture quality can be pretty poor, even at the very ultra preset, and it's especially noticeable on stuff like rocks, walls, faces, and clothing. There might be some kind of config file tweak or console command that can manually increase texture size, but I couldn't find it. The frame rate is in the low 70s most of the time through the jungle, with lows around 60 and highs of about 80. Spider-Man 2 is both CPU and VRAM limited, and my torture test of swinging along Broadway often results in some heavy stutter on weaker machines. In fairness, I wouldn't expect any of that from an X3D CPU and a 20GB graphics card, and sure enough, my Steam Machine Pro offers a smooth experience. Well, as smooth as this PC port gets anyway. 4K with quality FSR and very high settings mostly lingers in the low to mid 60s, reaching as high as 75 FPS at times. But I did find this park whereby frame rates consistently drop into the low 50s. I have sincere doubts that the Steam Machine will be able to handle the Last of Us series. The first game was patient zero for the VRAM panic, and the second game still needs 8GB for an uncompromised 1080p experience. The Pro, meanwhile, can almost handle this game at 4K maxed out, running between 50 and 60 FPS in my test scene. Dropping a few settings might do the trick to hit the desired 60 FPS target, but I found quality FSR was enough. Image quality still looks good, and frame rates now hang out around 80 to 85 FPS, dipping to a minimum of around 75. Space Marine 2 is another title that loads up the CPU, and while I've nothing against the mobile Ryzen 5s, some of the swarm scenes can tax even the strongest processors out there. The 7945 X3D is capable of over 100 FPS when the GPU isn't holding it back, but at 4K Ultra with quality FSR, most of the load is still on the GPU. In quieter moments we're seeing close to 90 FPS, but once things start to get hectic, it drops into the low to mid 70s. For all the success stories of the Steam Machine Pro, and indeed the Steam Machine and Steam Deck before it, there's a pretty huge downside. I tried unsuccessfully to run 3 different multiplayer titles: Marvel Rivals, Apex Legends, and Battlefield 6. Evidently, Valve is very interested in getting Battlefield 6 to work on their new hardware, and hopes that the Steam machine will be enough to convince developers to embrace an anti-cheat system that will work on their OS. But until that happens, the range of multiplayer titles open to Steam machine adopters will be limited. On the bright side, that does include Counter-Strike 2, and while I know this is a title where people are more likely to choose competitive settings to maximise their FPS, for this test I've cranked up settings to high and resolution to 4K to give the GPU a workout. Having the resolution this high completely messed up my mouse sensitivity, and evidently the Decky loader performance overlay doesn't get on with CS2, so I had a really bad deathmatch experience overall. But the frame rate was a perfectly cromulent 130 to 150 FPS most of the time. With Microsoft slowly whittling away at what little customer goodwill they had left, Apple continuing to fail to understand gaming on a fundamental level, Nintendo slowly devolving into copyright trolls who occasionally make world-class games, Nvidia funneling all their money and effort into shoring up the AI bubble, and AMD clinging desperately onto their coattails, Intel's journey to bankruptcy being slowed but not halted by cash injections from their own competitors, and Sony... I don't know, what does Sony even do these days? The last thing I remember was the whole Concorde disaster. Anyway, with the pillars of gaming all increasingly looking like they're made of chalk, it's no wonder we're all pretty f***ing disenchanted with the way things are. Valve aren't beyond reproach. They allowed a toxic gambling culture to build up around CS2, then shrugged innocently as they bankrupted a whole load of people while shutting it down. That being said, of all the companies out there right now, Valve is the one whose products have been mostly well received by the community at large. I wish them all the best with the Steam Machine projects. Maybe I'll even buy one to feature on the channel, if the price is right, but it won't be enough for all of us. I think it never could be. Even if Valve tried to cater to enthusiasts, it wouldn't satisfy everyone, because building your own gaming PC is half the fun for many of us. It would be nice to see a version of the official SteamOS made for the DIY PC market, and perhaps in time we'll see that happen. Not that I don't appreciate Bazzite, but in an ideal world, I'd like to see a version that isn't so shackled to Valve's chosen hardware. That being said, I am enjoying using Bazzite, so expect to see at least one more video about it before the end of the year. In the meantime, thanks for watching, kindly do the usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.